This podcast is part of E2C Network, where we share the whole Auburn experience. David Housel said it best: we are living in the whole of the Auburn experience. It encompasses so many different things, people, and yes, even places. But at its heart, at its core, it is all about our sports. It is all about our culture. And yes, all about the Auburn family. And because that experience is best with Auburn family, we've got to have one of those members here with me, back in the saddle with myself, your host, Kyle Loomis, my co-host for episode 40, Mr. Austin Scott. And I'm going to awkwardly say it again, or as some call him now, Daddy on Father's Day. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. We'll allow that on Father's Day of all days. But thank you very much. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there listening or watching. We're thankful for you, as you touched on it a little bit in the pre-show, Kyle. Fathers mean quite a lot to us, and we all have quite the mentors in our life that serve as actual fathers or not. So happy Father's Day to all.
On that note, and here's an interesting question I was thinking about just to kind of get us started. This is Auburn potpourri time. We just talk about anything for the first 10-minute segment or so. Who would you consider the father of Auburn football? Because I think it's pretty obvious if you want to go all the way back to its very beginnings. But when we talk about what Auburn football is at its core, who would that be? I think there's a couple people that have a case. Should I just say the obvious name?
Yeah, well, you were going to say, I'm guessing you're thinking of George Petrie.
Yes.
And that would be fair.
Yeah.
I think when we talk about like the founding fathers, George Washington is always going to come up first, right?
But then you also talk about like Thomas Jefferson. And so
correct.
For me, that switches to who else should be in that category. So any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can easily say another one. And I think a lot of people would say that Pat Dye is going to be one of those because of the mentality and attitude he brought to Auburn football of we're not going to be scared of anybody. We're going to work hard. And so I think he's definitely got to be another one up there. You have to talk about Shug Jordan as another one now we're getting into like a Mount Rushmore, but I think those are the father figures, I think, of Auburn football, certainly. And to its core, let's be serious that, when you talk about Shug Jordan and all that he meant to Auburn University and George Petrie and the Auburn Creed, these are also in individuals who had great influence on Auburn University as a whole, not just Auburn football too. So
yeah, and I think there's some other names that fall in there too, some administration such as Cliff Air, and, former members of teams, and I would argue that you could make a case in some ways that Bo Jackson is kind of that, and what he created in terms of the pivotal Auburn football player, like, what everybody wants to aim towards. In a sense, yes, he's more modern than a founding father like a George Petrie, but I think you could make a case there as well. Just an interesting thing since Father's Day comes around. I always think about this. I just wanted to kind of poke your head a little bit for what ideas I could get out of there. But other things that popped up this week, let me just talk about this to start off with. A little bit of sad news that we do want to address. A couple of deaths in the Auburn space. First up, Harvey Glantz, former Auburn track and field star. And it does pain me to have to mention this, that he was a coach for a long time for our rivals. But regardless of that, he started with us. He got his beginnings with us and became a track and field phenom, but also just a legendary name in the space in of itself. So sad to see that he passed this week. And then also the wife of Marquise Daniels, who is also herself an Auburn basketball star, Shayna Askew Daniels, I believe is how to say it. But I just wanted to express my condolences, obviously, to the Glantz, to the Daniels family, and obviously vicariously those of you within the Auburn family and friends and family connected to them that were obviously dealing with that right now. So obviously, Austin, a very sad week, and at least it started for Auburn.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think a lot of people kind of knew about the Daniels family situation and just unfortunate occurrence in a battle with cancer. But thankful that, she whether we perceive it as a win or loss, she has won that battle of cancer, and looking forward to hearing how her story will be used going forward.
Yeah, it's always it's a sad story, obviously, but it can be used as a powerful story as well. And I had trust, and what I know of Marquise and the Daniels family, I know that they're going to continue moving forward in honor of her and shining the light with the story of her life and how she battled that. So same thing for the Glantz family and Harvey Glantz. Happy to have him as part of our history, even though we're now talking about it in a very sad way. I do want to shift gears, awkward transition always from those type of things, but I had a great time in Auburn this week. Did you know that I came to Auburn, or did you like after the
I
fact know?
I had no idea. I saw the E2C account posting midnight photos of Auburn University, and I thought, oh goodness, what is Kyle getting into tonight?
Yes, I took a trip, not business related, but I made some business about it. You can't not go to Auburn and enjoy Auburn, and I can't not go to
Sure.
Auburn and work, quote unquote. A lot of people have been responding to these pictures I took, and I just, on a whim, I just went to campus after I had finished for the day. And first of all, besides what I was trying to accomplish, can I just tell folks, if you've not experienced Auburn in the summer, it's a whole different ball game.
Whole
Like
different.
literally, not only can you move around and breathe on roads, Austin knows this because he's a resident there, but I went to campus, and while yes, comparatively it was pretty empty, you still would see people walking through campus as I was here and there, but you just basically had the place to yourself and got great images. The air was just like perfect. It was not humid. It was, just a slight bit of cool in the air. I had the best time walking around taking pictures of campus and got some great shots from my camera phone of some of our famous buildings, athletic or otherwise. And I just wanted to, that's what we're about, sharing the Auburn experience. So it was experience Auburn in the summer, but experience Auburn at nighttime too. It's good stuff.
Yeah, I mean the summertime is different, and then you add nighttime into it as well. Even during school year, nighttime on campus is buzzing, but not quite the same. I also got to walk around at nighttime on campus several times, where we'd be coming back from different study sessions or whatnot, and also maybe getting into a little trouble, but we won't get that on the record. But always enjoyed just nighttime. You're right; it's quiet. It's always there's not as many lights, and so you get pretty skies usually. And those pictures are definitely worth checking out on our social media.
Yeah, and listen, when you don't have the giant lights of a stadium on outside of the AU on the, I guess it would be
Right.
the east side, I mean, you can get some pretty nice shots out there. So come to Auburn whenever you can, but there's some great just relaxing times that you can have, and I could have stayed out there all night, I'll be honest with you. So check out those pictures if you haven't done so. I'm not saying I'm professional anyway, but at least you guys got to have a glimpse at the tour I took around campus just on a whim on a warm yet slightly cool summer night in Auburn, Alabama. Last thing we want to mention, good news for the volleyball team. Our head coach, Brent Crouch, has been signed for another 5 years, and I think he has earned it, wouldn't you say?
Oh goodness, yes. We touched on it last week in our fall recap. The volleyball program, or the job that he did coaching the volleyball team this past year, and the trajectory the program is on certainly has earned him an extension. I think people are more excited about Auburn volleyball than they've been in a long time. And just more people are excited about Auburn volleyball, just in general, getting accustomed to watching it and used to the sport after the success of last year. His recruiting and his style of play has definitely set that up. So more than worthy of that extension, and hope he's here for a lot longer than that, because I think he's doing quite a good job.
Yeah, he's definitely earned it. Put Auburn volleyball on the map in many ways with their second stint into the NCAA tournament. And as we talked about, in our fall recap, we talked about shocking a few people. I just am very happy to see him being rewarded. And I would hope that we as the fans would continue to reward him and the players and the program by continuing to support them, not just 1 year where we're catching fire and catching NCAA volleyball by storm, but let's keep it going all the way through into next season as well. So in this show, we're going to hit a couple of big topics here. We're going to talk about some Auburn football recruiting, but we're also going to talk about some SEC schedules. Our first big topic tonight, let's hit recruiting. You know, that is what the people love to talk about, Austin, whether it's about stars, whether about a numbers game, who you beat out, who you may be flipping, maybe coming soon, attractions coming soon, maybe. We'll see. Man, nothing's, as of the recording of this podcast, we're talking about a certain number of commitments that began Auburn football's summer recruiting efforts. There are more that maybe by the time you're watching or listening to this that have occurred, or maybe more news has come out. So keep that in mind. But let's start off with what we know, Austin. 3 commitments in 1 week, technically 4, but I know most people don't count a preferred walk-on, but it's an important position to make sure you take care of. But your commitments for this week will first be wide receiver Bryce Kane from Mobile, Alabama, followed up on the same day, hours later, Kinsley Faustin, safety from Naples, Florida. Friday, Joseph Phillips from Tuskegee, Alabama, a linebacker, and then also mixed in there from Auburn, Alabama, a long snapper of J.R. Buckner, have decided to sign up, commit, be part of the Tigers. So a nice little group for this week, and we'll talk about what may be coming in just a second. But let's open the floor up and talk about these guys a little bit. What sticks out to you?
Yeah, huge weekend for Auburn. There will be people that say, oh, these guys are 3 stars or 4 stars. They're not the 5 stars. This kind of string of success of recruiting, as we talked about a little bit pre-show, has not happened very frequently over the last few years. So really exciting times for Auburn. We'll talk about it like you said, but just along with these guys who actually committed, there's been a host of guys of that higher echelon of, ranked talent that's been in Auburn recently. So really exciting times in recruiting. The big one that we just have to talk about because it was such a notable thing this week was Joseph Phillips committing to Auburn.
Yes.
A 4-star linebacker out to Tuskegee right down the road, as you mentioned. But a true battle between Auburn and Georgia that Hugh Freeze won, and is big. We've talked about it before, but Auburn has to win the battles between Alabama and between Georgia in the recruiting on the field. It just has to happen for them to keep up. And that's a true battle they won. It's a big game changer and really staple of this recruiting class so far for the Freeze era. And so big time and really exciting to see. People definitely, I think, that have been kind of lackadaisical about recruiting the last few years are caused to jump back into it because of something exciting like that. So really, really big deal. Props to them. And then, the other 2 guys it's not like they're slouches either. Bryce Kane, you beat an SEC foe and Ole Miss out for him. Kinsley Faustin, a safety in the secondary that continues to be deeper and deeper. So you just love it. You love that kind of trajectory they're on, and hopefully they continue this motivation. It seems like they will.
There's a couple ways you could chop up these commitments in this week and talk about them individually or as a group. I'll try to do a little bit of that. First of all, let's talk about Joseph Phillips. That's the big one, right? Stars wise, perception wise, it's important to win the battles between Alabama and Georgia. I would add into that as well. It's not as prominent as those 2, but Florida as well, because those are our 3 pipeline states. Obviously, the state that you're in of Alabama, Georgia, and then Florida. That's where we traditionally draw the majority of our guys from. It's usually in that order, 1, 2, and 3. So those are your kind of schools, and maybe throw Florida State in there as well, who you're competing with, and you can kind of go back and look at how we've done past 2 years before that, and now going forward, battles that we may or may not be winning. This is one of them, and that's a huge thing. You're going to hear Georgia fans say, well, it's the same thing. And look, there's our fans that do it too.
Yep.
We didn't want them anyway, and I would also caution folks that, remember, this isn't over. You got to make sure that you show out on the field, that you continue to build that relationship. And coaches know this. We're just talking about it now, and we're not doing their jobs for them. But this one may not be over. But for now, Auburn has won the battle between Georgia. The other thing that sticks out to me from this group, even including our preferred walk-on long snapper, J.R. Buckner, you have got a group of guys that are all from your backyard or
Yeah.
close to it. You've got Auburn, Alabama, Tuskegee, and then Mobile is close enough, and it's a Alabama stronghold. So I would argue too, with Bryce Kane down there, that you went in, even if Alabama didn't want him, maybe necessarily, you went into their territory and took somebody out. So just wins abound when you really kind of chop this thing up and talk about them.
Well, and especially when it's a first-year coaching staff, right? Like Hugh Freeze, we know, has been in the SEC and knows what kind of caliber guys he needs to compete in this league. But you're right, for his group to kind of establish these relationships with these guys this early is big. There's certainly more guys they'd be getting and more battles that they're going to have to win. But this continues to be a steady rise in trajectory of momentum. And I'm hoping that this is showing a bigger things to come for sure.
I believe also, and this is a fun little tie for you and me being big Malzahn fans, I believe Kinsley Falston was pretty high on UCF's list, and now Gus Malzahn being down there. I think we beat out the old coach for one, as much as you and I may love the guy, and we'll rehash our history with all that storyline and stuff like that. But it is still nice to know that we can beat out a former coach and convince them. I think we've got a leg up. It's Auburn, UCF. You may have won that bowl game, but and it's always, isn't it not weird to think about that he was the coach then that lost to the team?
Yeah, super weird.
It's a weird dynamic there, but all different ways to look at those four guys that, as of this recording, have committed. Very briefly, let's look at what may be coming down the pipe. As you mentioned, these are summer camps going on, have been going on, and taking a lot of official visits where they really get shown the red carpet. You can follow some of these guys on social media and see what all the staff does for them, whether it's stuff they get that when they come to the hotel, messages with certain former players or calls. They get shown around campus. They get the best rooms, on campus.
Right.
Red carpet's thrown out, basically, or the orange and blue carpet, I should say. We got no red here. No red here. A couple of names that are out there that people may want to be paying attention to. Khalil House, an offensive lineman, would be one. Malik Blockton from Pike Road, which is not too far away from Auburn. Defensive lineman in July, I think, is committing, and I think Auburn is favored for both of those. So maybe that's changed by the time you're watching or listening to this. But there's a big one out there. And when we talked about flips at the beginning of this, that is getting really interesting. And whether or not this guy comes to Auburn, the fact that Auburn's making it a game is showing you how things are changing from the last 2 years to now. Perry Thompson, current Alabama commit. If Auburn swings that one, boy, social media is just going to explode, don't you think?
Oh, it'd be ridiculous. And obviously, as you're touching on it, he was on campus this weekend. One a lot of people have been paying attention to, and I think Perry has said himself, this is an Auburn Alabama battle. It's down to them two. That's all I'm looking at. And so that's always going to raise eyebrows. A 5-star wide receiver from Foley High School in the Mobile area, as you touched on, that 251 area code. And so it's definitely one of those that seems to happen every recruiting cycle. It's like, is Auburn going to actually pull this guy away from big bad Alabama?
Mm-hmm.
And this one seems like it might be their best shot here in a while. And so we'll have to see what happens. I think he left the visit saying it was really impressive. It's Auburn or Alabama. I'm trying to decide before the season or whatnot. So that will be one to look at. That is one, as you touched on, Kyle, that everybody's going to say, well, we didn't want him anyway. No, that is one everybody wants. And so that will be interesting to see what happens. And I don't want to play the moral victory card, but I think you kind of touched on too. The fact that this is a battle is a big deal, and hopefully a sign of things to come in future recruiting cycles once this Freeze coaching staff has had time to get in on these guys a little earlier. Mm-hmm. That is something that is impressive, that it's just a battle in itself. But hopefully they pull the victory over Alabama and get this guy, and it'd be another one of those program changers for the recruiting cycle first year for sure.
Yeah, it's much easier protecting, I would say, a lead that you have. Well, some would argue maybe the opposite way, but I think in this sense, it's much easier to be working from the strong position than behind position for making ground up for guys. But Hugh Freeze, his staff seems to be doing that in bounds, whether it's for a name like a Perry Thompson. The last thing I'd like to mention too, what I love is not just the staff getting involved on social media and kind of giving fans hints something's coming, but now you've got players on the teams, and it's happened before, but I've never seen a concerted effort from players that, everybody thinks they know who the players are hinting at, but then you'll see from every position, offensive, defensive, so nobody knows. Like, everybody thinks, okay, that linebacker committed, so it must mean this linebacker is committed. This wide receiver commented, so it must be this wide receiver. I don't know who they're talking about. We have our guesses, but all I know is I love this all-out recruiting effort that's going in and selling Auburn. And when you combine Auburn in and of itself, that is easy to sell just because it's Auburn, with this type of effort, with this type of cohesion, it's an incredible thing to see. And so I'm loving every bit of it.
Yeah, it's the new age of recruiting, right? Like, it's always on. It never stops. There's graphics out the wazoo. There's videos out the wazoo, photos going off everywhere. And social media is part of it. And, the mystery behind all of it with eyeball emojis and the freeze emoji and all this is fun for the fans, fun for players, I'm sure, because, they're keeping up with the recruiting as much as anybody too, of where their buddies going and where their teammates going and all that. So really exciting. And we'll have to see who these emojis are all talking about. Hopefully we get to find out this week.
Look, when you can get the official Twitter account of Aubie the Tiger involved in that, that's saying something, my friend.
It's a big deal. It's a big deal.
All right, big topic number 2 tonight. Let's talk some more football. You didn't think we were going to be discussing this much football this early in the summer, did you? Like, it's a lot.
It never stops.
It truly never stops. But, we feel like we get these little breaks here and there. I thought I was getting a break this past week. Nope, that was not the case. What we're going to talk about, though, is the news that was already kind of previously announced. We knew was coming. The SEC was going to reveal its schedules for 2024, officially the first season with Texas and Oklahoma into the mix. Before we even get into what Auburn takes away from this, let me just say I am so glad this year that they decided we're going to announce this in the summer when nothing else has happened, because the last couple of times they've announced it like in October when football season's in full swing. And so it's already kind of like another thing to try to lump in with all the other coverage. So from a commentator's, standpoint, thank you. Please.
Yeah.
Thank you for the break. And we needed something to talk about this summer. But I will briefly give you the rundown, and then I want some Austin commentary on it for 2024. And this is not the dates or anything, and we're just discussing really SEC opponents. And we can throw the non-conference in there if you'd like. But for the SEC opponents that were announced for Auburn, for home, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Vanderbilt, and away, Alabama, Georgia, Kentucky, and Missouri. So when I look at that list, Austin, there's a couple of big talking points, but I want you to open us up with your thoughts about Auburn SEC schedules for 2024.
Yeah, overall, I was pretty pleased. I think, before we get into it, you were touching on when they release it. I'm never, ever, ever fully surprised by what the SEC network can turn into a primetime television show,
isn't it?
Other conferences just drop their schedules at 11 a.m. on a Wednesday morning.
Right. Can we just dispense with this SEC is not keen talk? I mean, we garner a primetime show about our SEC schedule drops. Let's end it there.
Here's the graphic. If I'm the Big Ten, here's their schedules. Have at it. No, we love to make fun of the moniker. It just means more. But what were the ratings like on this show? I can't imagine as they were unveiled. All that said, I was watching.
One thing too, I appreciated the way they did it. Let's do Oklahoma and Texas first.
Yeah,
like they're the new guys. Everybody's interested in them. I don't know that going alphabetical was the best choice. I loved it as an Auburn fan, but you know who didn't love it? I'm sure that the ratings went at the end as soon as Vanderbilt came up. So I felt so bad for like nobody's going to pay attention to them. Anyway, that was just something that I thought about.
I stopped watching after, I don't know. It was on, but I didn't care after Auburn went. And
right.
So yeah, you're probably right. They probably should have mingled it in there a little better. Anyway, Auburn's opponents. I think the big thing that is we knew Auburn would probably be going to Alabama. They stay on the home and away flip flop schedule. They're still going to Georgia. I think that was a big. Everyone was hoping that would stay the case, but to have it confirmed, that's a big deal to keep the Deep South Oldest rivalry, as well as keep it on the home and away trend that it is. Wouldn't have minded if maybe we flipped those and have a home and away again, but I think that would have required us going over there.
I would have done it. I would have done it in a heartbeat
just to get it back. I know.
Yeah.
I know. I would love maybe one week for us to talk about that. I just don't know why that happened. Like, I love that we got 2 home games in a row from 2012 to 2013, but I don't understand why. I have no idea how that happened the way it did, but
it's probably going to change after 2024. That's you and I are going to be talking about this again in a year when we finally get to the new thing with 2025, because this is not a permanent situation. This is just to get us to 2025.
Yeah, we'll be talking about it for sure on episode 98. But as far as, and I'll be coming up with a player for that, which is for this one's Blake Burkhalter and Tony Richardson. By the way,
worked it in. I love it.
It was really. I was been thinking about it for the past 20 minutes. Anyway, the biggest thing though is that Oklahoma is coming to Jordan-Hare Stadium in 2024. I really hoped we would get whoever it was going to be, Texas or Oklahoma, they'd be coming to Auburn. I desperately want to go to Norman or Austin whenever Auburn goes out there. But I was really hoping the first, we get to welcome in one of these their first year. I think that I really, really wanted us to play Texas. I wanted us to have Texas the first year. But the more I think about it, the more I'm excited about Oklahoma coming to Jordan-Hare Stadium.
Yeah, it's fun either way. Look, it's something new. It's exciting. We get to have first crack in our home stadium at one of the two. So you really kind of look at it, and if you're like me and Austin, who wanted Texas more than Oklahoma, you kind of look at it and you go, okay, well, we can't get everything we want. This is a pretty nice way to get things started with these two new opponents. Right. So love that fact of it. The other big things, and you've touched on them, the rivalries, the important ones have been maintained, the most important ones. Iron Bowl wasn't going anywhere, but people were concerned that Georgia and Auburn would go away for 2024, at least on an annual basis. That's not the case until we'll talk about 2025 when it gets here. I don't think it's safe, folks.
Yeah.
A couple of things to talk about here. When you talk about who had to leave the schedule and who might come into the schedule outside of Oklahoma and Texas, a lot of people were hoping somehow, some way for a Florida matchup. I was one of those.
Same.
And what that meant, even without that, you had to lose somebody. No more Tiger Bowl every single year. Auburn and LSU, the annual rivalry, which is a rivalry, it's developed into that, is no more. Are you disappointed? Thoughts about that?
Because I'll lump it, not as much of a rivalry, but I'll lump in the Mississippi schools with this because they're not on the schedule either. When we talked about preserving traditional like we weren't going to play the West again. It wasn't going to be like we're having the annual West every year with the way this is happening. It's just not feasible. And so I think that I've come to grips with that wasn't going to happen. To see all three of them not on there is strange.
It is.
But as you mentioned, someone had to go. And I think A&M not being on there wouldn't have hurt as much, or not. I don't want to say it hurts because we're going to play them again. And, a year off of LSU is not going to be the worst thing. But to not, A&M is more recent, right? They're not as, there's not the history. And so I think that wouldn't have been as bad. Arkansas the same way, while there's been some tension between Auburn and Arkansas.
Tension's putting it lightly.
No kidding. In recent years, like it's not the same history Auburn might have with LSU or even Mississippi State or even the drama with Ole Miss in the last few years. So it stinks to not see them, but I remind myself continually they're going to be on the schedule. It's just not for 2024. It's not like we're never going to see Auburn go down to Baton Rouge again or have Ole Miss coming to Jordan-Hare. So it'll all be okay. It's fun to see, Vanderbilt. I'm not upset about getting Vanderbilt for a second year in a row next year. And then, we don't see Kentucky as much, but I'm with you. I really was hoping somewhere between really just Kentucky and Missouri. I would not have minded at all if one of those was Florida or Tennessee. Honestly, I was
that
really
would be,
bummed that we didn't get either of those on the schedule.
I think when Auburn fans look at their current opponents that we see every year, we have always longed for some type of more annual, more recent, more
regular.
Yeah. Thank you. I was searching for vocabulary there. I couldn't get out. I do have a college degree from Auburn. I wasn't in I can't even talk. Wow. All right. Moving on. We were hoping for Tennessee. We were hoping for Florida. And then when you see the Mississippi schools gone completely with LSU, it's kind of like, did we really gain something here? I mean, like, so it's not anything to complain about. No. We are getting something new, something fresh. We're maintaining the most important things, but we're still, as Auburn fans, and I think especially Florida fans echo this. Every time I talk to a Florida fan, they say this too. We want that game back. There is regionally, historically, and so whether it gets fixed in 2025 remains to be seen. But that's if I'm talking about the biggest mistake or biggest thing that didn't happen for 2024 Auburn SEC schedule, it's the lack of Florida.
Yeah, and well, let's be honest too. This schedule is good for Auburn. Like, this is not, this is. I saw someone put it this way: this might not be an easier "quote unquote" schedule for Auburn, but everyone else is a little more evened out now. Mm-hmm. Auburn's still got to go to Alabama and to Georgia. Like, let's not put it lightly. This is still
those of you that are complaining that we got Vanderbilt, like opponents. Of fans of other opponents that are saying you got it easy with Vanderbilt and Missouri. Do you see where we got to go?
Way past due that we even this thing out. So I'm not complaining about schedule, but I put LSU with Florida and Tennessee in that secondary rivalry for Auburn that I just would have liked to just replace one of them with. It'll be okay because we're going to get them back. And if we do things this way where let's just say this is the slate we have 1 year and we have the slate the next year, well, then we'll get Florida and Tennessee both in 1 year. And the good thing is, as we've talked about before, we're going to get these matchups more, and that's how it should be. So I'm good either way, but I was hoping to see one of them on this 2024 slate.
Yeah, there's going to be things that you don't like about this. There's going to be things that you do like about this. The important thing to remember is this is for 2024. This is not only. Yes, this is not the holistic change. Now, they may decide that this is what has to happen going forward, and then we may have to have a further discussion. But for now, this is what you need to look forward to for the first year of the new SEC, basically becoming the SEC South. The SEC and the Southwestern Conference is what I think we should be moving towards at some point. But either way, we are excited for the change. We'll miss LSU. We will miss Ole Miss. We will. Wow, that's a little a little fun way of saying that. There, we'll miss Mississippi State, not the Cowbells, but we will miss playing them every single year in some way. But we look forward to a new year and a new season, and we'll be breaking that down much, much more as it gets closer and closer. That's going to do it for episode 40 here on the Auburn Experience podcast. A lot discussed, a lot of different topics that we got into even in the summer, and we thank you guys for tuning in with us on our way out. I'd like to give you where you can find us on Twitter. You can find me at Kyle Loomis 24, and of course follow the E2C network everywhere, including Twitter and various other social media accounts out there. Where can they contact you, Austin?
Austin G. Scott is where you can find me. Tell me what you thought about Tony Richardson and Blake Burkhalter for episode number 40. Episode number 41 next week. Kyle, we're getting closer and closer to an easier pick each week of players for episodes. So I can see the light at the end of the tunnel.
You are literally 3 episodes away from the easiest pick ever.
Absolutely.
And we'll wait for that one earnestly, but happy to have you even here on a difficult one for you on episode 40. Thank you all for tuning in. Until we talk to you again. War Eagle.